Over the last 3 to 4 weeks I've been extremely busy printing and framing a number of my images, such as this one. I've been doing this in preparation for something that's coming up in a week's time, where I'm going to be displaying and selling a number of my images. And as I was doing the work for this, I thought it would make for an interesting video to show you some of the digital images and also the final framed products, and to talk a little bit about the images themselves, but also regarding the paper types that I use when I'm printing my images and how I decide on a specific paper type for each individual image. For me, the most enjoyable part of landscape photography is actually being out on locations such as this, capturing these images, but very close behind that in terms of enjoyment for me is the process of printing my images and ensuring that the final result, such as this, resembles almost identically what I can see on my monitor regarding the digital image. It's a process I really enjoy, and I think when you go out to take a landscape image, the whole process starts the minute you think or have the thought of going to do that. You think about where you're going to go, when you're going to go, and for me the process ends when you actually see the final print or the final framed print, such as this one. It's very satisfying to get an image you're happy with and be proud to hang on your own wall, or that other people would like to hang on their walls and see every day. Regarding paper types, I use a number of different paper types, but I find that I print most of my images on one of two different paper types. So I'll cover those quickly for you just now. They're both Fotospeed papers, and the first one here is the Smooth Cotton 300. So just to read a little bit of the manufacturer's description, it's 100% cotton, pH neutral, matte fine art paper with an ultra smooth surface. I really like this paper. I find that it gives really natural looking colours in my images, so it works well for some of my landscape, some of my woodland images, and when I want an image to look subtle, it's also the paper type I go to. I'll actually put up a digital image just now to show you an example of one of the images I print on this paper. It gives a nice subtle look, it handles the colours well, and I really like this. It's the matte paper I'm using at the moment. Moving on to the other one, again by Fotospeed. This is the Platinum Barita 300. So this one, again, 100% acid free, fine art paper with a smooth unglazed gloss surface. This one has got a high Dmax and it's got a wide colour gamut. This is an excellent paper. I've never been disappointed with an image that I've printed on this paper. It works very well for black and white, it works very well for colour too. I find it gives very vibrant colours. This image, which I'll talk about in a second, is printed on this paper. It's got a very subtle texture to it, and I really like both papers. My images come out very sharp on both papers, and that's what I'm using at the moment. I'm not connected or sponsored by Fotospeed in any way. I buy all the papers myself. I do like them as a company. I've spoke to a number of people who work there over time. They've always seemed very nice, knowledgeable and helpful. So I really like the company and I really like the papers as well. So I'll go through a few of the images that I've been printing and framing recently. We'll start with this one, and I'll try not to take too long on each image, but I'll talk a little bit about the image itself and also the paper type I used to print the image and why I decided upon that particular paper. So starting with this image here, it was a scene that I really liked. I liked the reflections of the clouds in the water. There's some nice leading lines in the image as well, and we've got these wonderful vibrant colours, autumn colour, and that is the reason I picked the Platinum Barita paper for this particular image, just to give the colours a little bit of pop. Small details sometimes matter in an image, and as I was capturing this image I noticed two leaves, this one here and this one, and I wanted to wait. They were both drifting across at the same time, and I wanted this leaf here just to come into the correct position, just to add a little something to the image, and I managed to capture it just before this leaf went into the reflection of this tree here. So I really like this image. Nice leading lines, nice colour, and I think it looks really nice on the Barita paper. So as we work through these framed images, you'll probably notice that most are printed on Burita, but there is a significant number printed on the smooth cotton as well. To be honest, I would get the image looking quite nice to my eye on either paper, but I just try to pick the paper I think will work optimally with each image. So again, this one is on Burita. I really like this image. There is a tremendous amount of detail you can actually see on these layers of hills and mountains as they go off into the distance. This was at the top of a hill that I climbed at sunset, and I was really treated to this wonderful colour in the sky, a lot of orange, and I quite liked the leading lines of this rock here up to the sun, and there is just so much tremendous detail. But it was one of the most amazing sights I'd witnessed when I got to the top of this hill. The colour was just amazing, and I really like as I say, the layers of the hills and mountains as they go off in the distance. But the Buritas worked very nicely for this image due to the colour, the vibrancy, and there's also quite a lot of dark area in the heather here, but I can see all the detail in the different shades, etc. So I really like this image on the Burita. I really like this next image. It's a very natural looking image, and that is one of the reasons I picked the smooth cotton for this particular one. I just wanted the colours to look very natural. It was a day of very changeable weather. There was sometimes bright sunlight, it sometimes went very dark, there was rain, and I was keeping an eye on the light in the sky which was moving across. And I captured this image when it just had some subtle lighting on the mountain here, but there's some lovely reeds, etc. in the water, and it's just a very natural looking scene. And for images such as this, I find the smooth cotton works very well, and I just like how the colours are produced on this paper. Next up is one of my woodland images. I quite like this image because it's got some very nice colour in it at the bottom here with the heather and the ferns. And I spotted this tree here which had some very interesting ivy growing on it. And then off in the distance I spotted this other quite interesting tree. So I used the tree here on the right with this branch. It's got some very interesting light as well. And this tree on the left with the other branch similar to this one, it sort of frame this tree in the distance. I also noticed, as I say, the heather here, and there's a similar patch just upwards. So we've got this sort of leading line that comes in diagonally and takes your eye up to this image off in the distance. But there's lots to see in this image, lots of nice colour. And I spoke about at the start of the video how I think the smooth cotton gives very natural looking images, and I like how it handles the colour in woodland scenes as well. So very happy how this one's turned out in the smooth cotton. I really like this image here. This was taken at the start of autumn this year in 2018, and I was out specifically looking for the start of autumn colour, and this quite vibrant yellow on this tree here grabbed my attention. I really like the reflection in the water, and I think these rocks here work very well as foreground interest. I like how the reflection, I was able to position it just in the opening here of the rocks and just above these little bits of grass or flowers that are coming out of the rocks. I think the composition works very well. I like how there's some dark areas in contrast with the very bright areas. This image was printed on the platinum Burita paper just because of the dark areas and the very vibrant colour, and I think the end result is really nice. This is another image that I'm very fond of, obviously taken at the coast, taken at sunset. And when I looked out to this scene, it was quite bright. I wasn't able to see too much. The sun, when I arrived here, was more higher up into the left in the sky, and it was extremely bright. But I just had a feeling if I was patient and could wait, and I really wanted to wait and capture the sun just as it went behind these rocks so I could get a starburst. I just thought if I was patient I would really be rewarded, and I got some wonderful reflections on the sea. I really like the foreground in the image, the rocks and the light hitting the rocks here. And we've got some wonderful colour in the sky as well. We've got some birds sitting on these rocks. Obviously this area is darker because the sun's at the far side. And then as the sun came through this gap, there's some light in this area and some nice reflections in the water. So it's an image I really like. I took a little bit of a gamble because, as I say, it was so bright. As I stood here looking at it, I couldn't really see much. So I was just patient and waited till the sun went down. And by using some filters, I was able to capture this image. I really like it. It's printed on the Beretta because there's some darker areas and there's some nice vibrant colour of the sunset as well. And I just think it works really nice. I'm very pleased with the result on this paper. So this is a very atmospheric, moody image. I was exploring some mountains and it was another day of very changeable weather. We had sunlight, we had rain, heavy rain. We had rainbows, and it didn't last very long, but I was very pleased to be able to capture this image. So we've got some nice dark, moody areas, and then we've got the areas here where the sun was actually hitting. And then we've got this wonderful curve of the rainbow here and some very atmospheric conditions in the sky as the sort of torrential rain moved across the scene. So it's a very moody image, and I think the colour is important in this image, and it was quite a moody moment and I didn't want it to be too vibrant, so I picked the smooth cotton paper for this particular image, and I think it works really well. I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. So here we have another very atmospheric, moody image. It was a very misty, foggy day, and I had the fortune to capture this scene in those conditions. I was obviously drawn to this very interesting tree at the far right hand side of the riverbank here, and I chose to do a long exposure because I thought the look that gave the water really enhanced the mood and feel of the scene. We've got very subtle colour in the image as well. There's not a lot of colour, and this is literally how it looked to my eye when I was actually there. And we've got lovely detail in the trees that sort of fade off into the mist in the distance. I used Beretta for this image because I wanted to still see some of the detail in the darker areas. There's obviously quite a lot of contrast in this image. And we've got some wonderful sharp details as well. It's an image I'm really proud of. I just like looking at this image and all the subtle detail in it. This next image that I've got in front of me now really just makes me think of nature and being out in the outdoors. It's just a really natural looking scene. I really like it. The first thing that drew my attention to this scene was this wonderful tree off at the far side of the river. Then as I began to explore the scene more, there were so many other interesting trees and splashes of colour in this image. We obviously had the flow of the river as well, which I've tried to use the right shutter speed for just to give it the type of look that I was hoping to achieve. As I say, there's some nice colour and there's a lot of detail in it as well, so I chose to use the Beretta for this image because I think it made the colours really work and just gave them a little something just to make them look how the scene was when I captured it. Key to this scene was actually waiting on the light. It wasn't a very bright day. I think there was some sunlight earlier in the day, but by the time I arrived at this particular location, the brightness had went out of the sun in the sky. It was beginning to set. And it's subtle, but there was a very brief period of brightness. You can see some of the sunlight in the background here, but it also just gave some subtle side lighting to this tree, which was the main object that caught my eye initially in this scene. So I really like it. As I say, it just embodies nature to me. So this image here in front of me now is something captured in quite unusual conditions. You're not going to get these types of conditions a lot. As I stood at this side of the water and looked across, I literally couldn't see any of the trees at the far side. I could maybe see something like 20-30 yards at most, and even that was obscured by the fog. Very unusual conditions, and then for a very brief period of time the sun came out ever so briefly, a fleeting moment, and I felt very fortunate that I captured it, and I could remember thinking I felt I captured something quite special at the time. So the sun came out, gave this wonderful colour, and also the reflection in the water, the reflection of the trees, and there's some subtle detail of another tree line here underneath the main one. So you can also see here the sun breaking through a gap in the trees. So if you can actually come up and look at this image closely, there's so much detail and it's just got a very calm, peaceful, atmospheric look. I chose Beretta for this one. due to the bright areas of the sun. I wanted that to have a little bit of vibrancy to it, and also, as I say, there's a lot of dark areas, so I wanted to ensure the tree line came out clearly and you could see some detail in the darker areas. But it's got a unique look to it, this image, and a lot of atmosphere, and I'm quite proud of this one. So back to the coast for this particular image, and I got this image by getting up very early in the morning. It was taken in summer this year, and I wanted to capture the sunrise. You can just see the sun here behind some clouds. A long exposure, I wanted it to have like an ethereal type look to it, this image, and I included this rock here, and obviously there's a rock here. I just felt I included this one to give the image some balance. I think it holds the left side of the image quite nicely, and we've got some rocks here for leading lines. So we've got dark in this image, obviously dark areas, you can see all the detail and still the vibrancy of the sky and some of the reflection in the water. I achieved this by using Brita for this image when I came to print it, and it's produced the image with exactly the type of look that I was hoping for. So I should say at this point that many of the images I'm showing today, my framed images, you can see me capture in some of my vlogs. There are a number I'm showing today which aren't in vlogs, obviously, but this one is. And I can remember saying in the vlog that it was a day of great opportunities. The weather was changing so much. There was some lovely sunlight, there was cloud, there was rain, there was atmosphere. I think there was a bit of fog as well. And this is an image that I deliberately wanted to be black and white. I think I said in the vlog that there was opportunity for some nice black and white photography. So this is one shot with black and white in mind from the word go. I really like this image. I was watching this patch of light in the sky move across. It was coming in from the distance, sort of this direction, and I could see the light move across the land, and I was hoping it would hit this mountain here, which it did, and that's why I really wanted the image to be black and white, just to emphasize that. I really like the reeds and the water in the foreground. We've got some bright areas reflected in the water, and lovely detail in these wonderful trees at the far side of the water, but some dark areas, some light, a lot of detail in this image. And I chose Brita for this one. As I said, I think at the start of the video, Brita works very well in black and white, and I think it's done a fantastic job of reproducing this image the way I wanted. I really love this image because I really feel it tells a story. We've got this solitary Highland cow out in blizzard conditions. It was quite strong wind, the snow was really heavy, it was sheeting across from left to right when I captured the image. I think I captured this one with a focal length of probably close to 200mm. And if you look closely at the Highland cow, you may struggle to see this in the video, but you can see the snow sheeting past it. But I really love the patterns and colour in the sky. There's a lot of detail. You can see some of the blades of grass coming up through the snow being bent over in the wind. And we've got this Highland cow which looked up briefly at me, and it's out in its own, surviving in these conditions, and it was at either its food or water bowl here in a lot of snow and blizzard conditions. So I think it tells a wonderful story. I printed this one on smooth cotton. I just wanted a very natural look to the image. I didn't want any reflective properties to the paper surface, and I'm really pleased with this image. So here we have another image which really has a lot of atmosphere to it, and I'm really pleased with how this one has turned out. I was lucky to get these conditions. I may not have took this scene otherwise. I think the fog really makes it. We've got some really nice lines through the heather here which lead you out to these mysterious trees which you can just see in the fog. The fog is obviously getting thicker as you move through into the image, and then you can just see the subtle tree line as well. It's a bit easier to see here, but the fog is thicker over this side, but you can see it. And there's just some nice subtle detail as well. We've got some rocks with moss, and I think this little tree or whatever's starting to grow here, I think it is the start of a tree, just adds a little something to the image. and holds the sides of the image, and some nice lines up to these trees. But wonderful atmospheric conditions, and the fog obviously doesn't remain consistent, so sometimes you can see a bit more, sometimes you can see a bit less. And it was just a case of capturing these trees when I thought they were covered enough in the fog, but not too much. I really like the image, lots of atmosphere. I used smooth cotton for this image just to give it a natural look. I had a little bit of work to do to get the colour temperature correct for the fog here to make it look the way it was when I captured the image. But I'm really pleased with it, and I think it's got a lot of atmosphere. This is another image that was captured on a day of very changeable weather. We got some nice sun, we got rain, we got very strong winds, we got pretty much everything, I think, except snow, although I think there was some sleet on this particular day. But it looks very nice at this particular moment, but with some wonderful atmospheric clouds as well. And I actually took this shot handheld. It was a very difficult place to get a tripod into. I was in some very high heather. And key for me in this image was waiting until this tree here got a little bit of light on it, and also that the light was very nice on the mountains at the far side of the water. So I really like this image. Again, it's one where there's a few darker areas with detail in them, and also some brighter areas as well. And I used the Burita paper for this image, and it's turned out quite nice. There's a lot of detail in it, and everything's really sharp. So this image here was captured very close to sunset. The sun was setting off behind the mountain here on the right. You can see the last of the light hitting the mountain over at the left. And the sunlight was getting through to these hills in the distance. There was some wonderful light and shadow on them. You can see the glow of the setting sun in the sky as well. The pathway leads your eye off into these mountains, which have got some nice light on them, and there's some nice foreground interest and leading lines also from the rock here. Very fond of this image. I've got nice memories from when I captured it, and I can remember clearly that as the sun set, even though it was starting to get quite dark, there was this lovely glow to the ground in this image. And that's the primary reason I picked the Burita paper for this one. I just wanted to ensure that the colours had a subtle vibrancy to them to reflect the scene as I saw it. When I captured this image, I'd been out in a day filled with mist and fog. It was such a wonderful day to be out, and I'd been exploring this woodland. And I had the fortune that when I was exploring it, I found this wonderful scene, and also there was a subtle break in the mist up in the sky which was letting the sun come through, and it was casting some magical golden light down into the scene and this tree here. The light was amazing, so I really wanted to capture this scene. I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. There's a sort of semicircle here with some ferns, and there's this fallen tree, and then you've got the trees in the distance as they fade out into the misty conditions. But we've got this fallen tree, and it almost feels like this one is sort of watching over it. And we've got a similar tree here which I wanted to include coming in from the right of the frame. They're sort of guarding over this fallen tree, and then I sort of see the other trees around it as spectators. But I really like this image, some wonderful detail. There was some wet drops on the trees as well from the misty conditions, and just the shape and the light on the trees is really nice in my opinion. I like the colours and the stones and mossy stones, etc. at the bottom as well. Because of the vibrancy, the colour, the detail, I chose Burita for this image, and I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. So I've finally reached the last image that I'm going to show you in this particular video, and I think it's a nice one to finish. It's one of my favourite images that I've captured. I arrived at the scene just before sunset, and I remember this being a very long day of landscape photography. Long but very enjoyable. I got up very early in the morning in the dark, headed off, walked many miles, and I remember coming home in the early hours of the morning into the following day. But I really wanted to find an image that I liked, and if I remember correctly, this is the only time in that whole day I took my camera out of my bag. I arrived just before sunset. The sun was probably up in this area, and I waited until it was just going down behind the mountains here in the distance. Got some nice light, some really atmospheric clouds in the sky and some nice colour as well. And I can remember the ground again just glowing slightly as I captured this image due to the setting sun. I think in landscape photography you don't always need a strong foreground, midground and background, but I think this image really works well because it's got those three things and it's got a bit of atmosphere as well. So we've got the strong foreground with the rocks, the grass has got a nice glow to it, we've got some flowers here as well. The midground is very nice with these wonderfully shaped trees, and then we've got a very strong background with the sky and the mountains, and there's subtle lighting as well. A lot of detail in this image. I think it's a very nice composition as well, and I printed it on the Barita paper due to the colours, the vibrancy and some dark areas as well in the mountains. I wanted to really see the detail. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. I've covered quite a few images and talked about the paper types I've used for each one. I hope you found it useful. Thanks so much for your time, and I'll hopefully see you soon for another video.